Now, into the ticket office of Disneyland.
Oh boy, let's do this.
Don't think the CIA is going to be trying to hack your second-gen iPod.
I didn't think so. There might have been a lot of illegal music on there. I wouldn't doubt it. But, I mean...
You were supposed to bring death to the flagships, not join them.
Google has found a new way to piss me off.
iTunes is a constant source of embarrassment.
Behind-the-scenes camera crap.
Here, tell us about courage, Phil. Tell us about courage.
I am Nadella. I can't do it anymore without laughing. I was going to do the whole thing.
Welcome, everybody, to the Calling All Platforms podcast. I'm your host tonight, Caleb. I'm here with Landon.
Hello.
And no Wes. Unfortunately, he is working again.
Yeah.
He is an essential worker, though, providing cheese to the world. So this is an important public service that he provides to you, listener.
True story.
So you should be grateful.
To Caleb's kids, he is known as Cheese Santa.
It is very true. They're always happy when Cheese Santa comes over and brings cheese. He has a long beard. He's jolly. I don't really know what else you want.
We need a remake of Jingle Bells, but a cheese version.
Yes. Ooh. I'm trying to think of how, like, Jingle Cheese, Cheezel Bells. I don't know.
Ooh, maybe not either of those. Those both sound really not great.
Oh, very true. Okay, well, let's move on from that, if we can. Landon, why don't you go ahead and tell us, like, news and stuff that's happened?
All right. So the news that I've got, there's not a whole lot. But I did want to mention Google Pixel Fold reviews have been coming out past couple weeks. And I want to say right off the top that if you, for some reason, had the thought of getting an Android tablet, one, don't. Two, maybe just buy the Pixel Fold, because it's probably the best Android tablet you're going to get. And by saying that, I also, it's interesting. So the reviews on this thing are very mixed. A lot of people do like the software experience. Google has done a pretty decent job there for the most part. And the hardware is also relatively good for the most part again. Like the hinge, everyone loves the hinge and how tight it is, but they also all hate the fact that if you want it to go a flat 180 degrees, you have to force it to do that because of the way the hinge is designed, which I understand to a point, because Google wanted it to make it so like you can open it and have it just sit at any angle and it just holds there, which is really nice. I will say that. That would be very beneficial. But it makes it so you can't easily fully open it flat.
Yeah, it doesn't like snap into an open position toward the end.
It is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Everything, pretty much every review out there does say that when it's closed, this is the best foldable phone in this form factor to use closed for two reasons. One, the outside screen is a normal form factor. It's not like super skinny and tall like the Samsung ones.
Yeah.
Or, like most of them are that way. Some are a little better than others, but most are that. This one, it's more of your traditional aspect ratio from 5 years ago. So it's not kind of how it has gotten today, where it is a little taller and skinnier. But it's not like Samsung's Fold, where it's super skinny and tall.
Yeah.
Like, it's just relatively normal. So that aspect of it, everyone is praising this phone for that. So that's nice. But the one thing that I'm hearing on the inside, like the inside screen, is that it's almost like Google made the software to work with a Surface Duo rather than a tablet, because it's almost like two separate screens on one screen. Like,
that's
you can't even put a widget in the middle. Like, it's got to go on one edge or the other edge. You can't put it in. It's really weird. And then also, like, if you have it open, you got one screen on your main device, you open it up, and then it's got your first screen on the left and your second screen on the right. It doesn't just, like, you can't even, like, customize the inside screens to be different. Which would make the most sense to me. Like, your outside screens could be one thing, then you open it up and it's customized even more.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but it's literally like your left side of the display is your first screen, and then your right side of the display is your second screen, and then you swipe to get to your third or fourth screens, and they're the same. It's the third and fourth. It's really weird.
That is interesting.
That is like one thing I've heard from multiple people on these reviews is, why Google? I mean, maybe have that as an option, but give us the option to also not have that.
Yeah.
And they could fix this down the road. That could be an easy software update. Be like, okay, here you go. Inside screen can be customized to whatever you want. You can put the widget in the middle if you want. Doesn't have to go to one side or the other. I mean, I kind of understand what they're going for. They're going for consistency when you open and close. But at the same time, it's like, when I open the display or open it to that bigger display, I'm doing that for a reason, not because I want the same experience on the inside as the outside, you know?
Well, and to a certain extent, I kind of understand it. Like, if you use a Mac with multiple monitors and you use virtual desktops, there's two ways that you can do that. Either all of your desktops have their own space, quote unquote. Spaces is what Apple calls the feature. And you can switch between desktops on that monitor, separate, like completely independently from what everything else is doing. Or all of your monitors share the same space. They're still treated like a separate monitor, and you can obviously lay out your programs and whatnot however you want. But if you switch spaces, it switches all of the monitors at the same time. And it seems like Google is kind of doing it that way, where it's like technically these are separate things, like it's a larger screen and whatnot, but the way that they're treating it is like, no, this is all part of the same thing. If you want to put things here, you want to customize things here, you're doing it on one screen and it's the same for everything else. Whereas I think what people are kind of asking for is the ability to treat it more like this is a completely separate thing than the outside screen on the device. Don't treat them like they're the same screen.
Yeah.
I understand both, and I think that the right way to do it is to, put a toggle in the settings. Mm-hmm. Like, that's kind of the thing that baffles me, I guess, is Apple, when they introduced the feature, put a toggle in the settings. They let you have it both ways.
Yeah.
And Google didn't. Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Like, the one thing that does stretch between the two displays, quote unquote, on the inside is the dock and the search bar that's going to be at the bottom on your, on the main outside display. Right. So it does have that tablet form factor. It does still look like that. And that dock is very useful. Like, Google has made it so, like, if you're inside of an app, you can just slightly swipe up from the bottom and it pulls that dock up and you can quickly switch between apps that way. And that's got a ton of praise on their tablets, like on the Pixel tablet and on the phone. But that's the only thing that really makes it seem more like taking advantage of that bigger display. It's just really strange.
More like a tablet instead of just two phones.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be a better version of the Duo because it's one display rather than two.
But the Duo doesn't have a crease down the middle of the screen. It's
just a gap.
And it's thinner. It's a lot thinner.
I mean, it is thinner, but honestly, not by a whole lot. The Pixel Fold is true. Actually, definitely the really thin.
Yeah, that's true.
But that also comes at a hit to battery life because that has not been great on this phone so far for most reviewers. Like, on the outside display, using it by itself, you're getting less than average battery than a normal phone. Then when you open it up, it's like, oh, that's even more battery going down the drain because it's a bigger display. So keep that in mind. But overall, most people do seem to like it. Like, I can't remember his real name, Mr. Mobile, if you've seen his stuff. He is a foldable phone guru. Like, that's like his daily driver has been a foldable phone since Samsung came out with one. And he really likes this phone. Like, I think he's going to be switching to this phone for now at least until Samsung comes out with their new one. And even then, he might keep this one over that. So he's really liking it, but it's still like it's weird. And also, you need to keep in mind Jerry Rig Everything on YouTube. He's the one that destroys phones.
Yeah,
he's the one that
durability
found out
testing.
about bend gate on the iPhone 6. Like he snapped it in half.
Oh yeah,
that's how he got popular, is because of that video. But
that's true.
Like his other videos, and I watched the Pixel Fold video, and he says that every other foldable phone he's not been able to snap in half. This one he did. Now, he did mention it wasn't the hinge. It didn't break at the hinge. It was the same thing that took down the iPhone 6. It's the antenna lines. There was a chink, basically a kink in the armor right there that made it break, and so by bending it the opposite direction, destroyed the display inside, because then it wasn't usable after that point.
Yeah.
Because it's only meant to bend one direction, not both.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so this one, definitely not the most durable when it comes to that. But again, like I said, like that hinge, you have to really try to bend it the opposite direction, because you have to try to get it to go flat. So
yeah,
you may not have that problem, but just keep in mind that that is a problem. He also got an interesting warning that I don't think he's ever gotten on any phone, where he always does a lighter test, a flame test on the screen, and it just shut down on him. And then when he turned it back, like it took about 5 or so minutes to turn back on, because apparently it overheated.
Right.
Which maybe he was just happened to put the lighter right next to the CPU or something.
Sensor or something.
Yeah. So
Wild.
it's like, it's really interesting, because he said that's never happened to him before, and I've never seen it in any of his videos, so I'd say that's probably a fair assessment, but
Wild.
It's weird. But yeah, that's the Pixel Fold. It's a decent folding phone. It's a first generation version.
Yeah,
from
good
Google.
first attempt.
So, I mean, it's not a bad option. The biggest benefit you're going to have here is that you're getting that Google experience. Whereas on Samsung is you're getting their experience, which in my opinion is not great, but a lot of people seem to like it because Samsung is very popular for some reason. But I mean, if you are dying to have a foldable phone, but you want to have a Pixel version, then this is the one to go for. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Now on to Nothing. The Nothing Phone 2 hasn't been officially announced yet. They're doing the same thing they did with the first one, where so the one that everyone is talking about is Marquez Brownlee has a video of the Nothing Phone 2, and it's basically the same thing that he did last year with the Nothing Phone 1, where he can talk about the light system on the back, which is it. Like if you look at it with the lights on, you can definitely see, okay, this is a Nothing phone. It's a very similar design language. You can still see the insides of the phone. Well, quote unquote, the insides of the phone. And I mean, it looks like a Nothing phone. It looks good, but you notice that the lights are a little different. They have, instead of a lot, like fewer connected LED strips, there's more smaller LED strips just in the same pattern.
Yeah.
But because of that, it is a little more customizable. It's not as customizable as some people would like. It's still not RGB. It's still not like you can't just do it with any app, and you can't do anything you want with it. But they are opening up to third-party apps to be able to tap into certain features. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
But like it does still have the little exclamation point light at the bottom of it. When you're charging, will let you know, okay, the progress is there. It also has, if you set a timer, there's one of the light strips that will slowly, I can't remember if it's turning on as the timer goes down or turning off as the timer goes down, but it does give you that little indication, which is cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
It also does volume. So if you turn the volume up, you're hitting the volume button, one of those lights gets brighter as it gets louder and dimmer as it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So just little features like that, which are really nice. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, for sure.
I just, again, and everyone else as well, it's like, okay, we still want more customizations and maybe put in RGB lights so we can have like color options as well.
Yeah.
But they're getting closer to that, and everything eventually it might get to that point. But as of right now, they are adding features, and they are beneficial features. So, but that's pretty much all we know about this phone so far, at least officially. And I'm not going to go over what we unofficially know because I just don't care about unofficial specs until they're, official.
Yeah, say something about it. Yeah, that's fair.
All right, now on to, I would say on to Caleb's next phone, but he just bought a new phone, a new-ish.
It's phone. True. And my phone is still smaller, but not by much.
Not by much. But what was almost Caleb's next phone, the Asus Zenfone 9 from last year.
Yeah.
Asus made the Zenfone 10 this year, and it's basically the same thing, just better. Which all the reviews for last year on the 9 were like, this is nearly the best phone you can buy. Yep. And they just made it better in the 10. Yep. So let's go over the specs really quick. It's got a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. So there's the top of the line.
Top of the line.
Flagship chip right there. It's got a 5.92-inch AMOLED display, which, again, on the smaller side, but a lot of people like that. And Apple's not giving you that option anymore unless you buy a year-old phone. Which is what Caleb had to do.
Yep.
And they are, on paper, it does have 144 hertz refresh rate. But there's a caveat to that because it's only when gaming and only on certain games as well. But they can't technically put that as the spec on there. And so they do. But you can have it at 120 hertz, and then it's an LTPO display, so it can have that changing as depending on how you're using it. So really nice. So good one on Asus for that.
Yep.
It's got either 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, depending on which one you get. 128, 256, or 512 gigs of storage. 4,300 milliamp hour battery, USB-C charging, and 30-watt wired charging, and 15-watt wireless charging, something that was not on the previous model, the wireless charging. So another benefit right there. They kept the headphone jack.
Yeah.
So another benefit right there.
It's
the front camera is a 32 megapixel camera, which outputs an 8 megapixel image, but decent camera there. And then the rear cameras, they also upgraded because that was one thing that wasn't quite flagship last year, but they were still really good cameras. But they upgraded those. So the main sensor is a 50 megapixel camera with a 6-axis gimbal stabilizer inside, which is why, like, if you look at this phone, the cameras on these things look huge. But that's because that's because they have these gimbals on them that are really, really good. Like, they are really good at stabilizing things. So that actually helps with taking photos because it, takes out some of that shaky hand problem you're going to have while taking pictures and makes for a better photo. So that's a nice thing. The other camera is a 13 megapixel wide angle sensor. So no telephoto lens, but it's not a full flagship phone. Like, the prices are not flagship prices. So you're going to have to cut back a little bit. And that's fine. I mean, they did make the digital zoom on this one better as well. It's still digital zoom, but it is not bad for what it is. And then the colors on this thing, it has midnight black, which is like a flat black color, a starry blue, which is really pretty, aurora green, also really good. All these colors are really good.
Yeah, it's a good looking phone.
Comet white, which is the only one that actually has white, like the aluminum frame on it is also white, whereas the other ones are all black. Mm-hmm. So the white one is just all white, which is really good looking. And then the Eclipse red, which is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
And
that's the one I would go for.
Yeah, I love that. I would debate between the red and the blue one. They're both really nice looking. But the other benefit here is it still has that soft touch feel on the back, which last year's phone, everyone loved the feel of it, but it like faded and got dirty. Like, it was weird really quickly. Whereas this one, so far on the reviews I've seen, is better. So like right now, currently, people that have this phone aren't noticing it currently. Like most people have only had it a week or two, so still have to wait and see how long term it is. But that other one, even within that review period, was already starting to get discolored and whatnot. So that's a good sign that it's not happening yet.
Yep.
And then it comes down to price, and this is where it gets fun. $699 in the US.
Yep.
For basically a flagship level phone, and at that smaller footprint, which a lot of people do like, especially Caleb.
Yep.
And I mean, Asus's software experience is near stock Android. Like it's going to be very similar to what you see on a Pixel phone. And one of my favorite things about the software on this phone is like when you're setting it up, actually. I've seen videos on this. I saw it on the 9, I think, as well. But I've seen it here, especially. When you go to set it up, it asks you how you want things. Like you can customize almost every UI feature if you want it to be the Asus version or Google's version. Down to like the settings menu, you can have either option. Your home screen, you can have like pretty much every UI feature on here. It lets you choose, okay, and you can mix and match. Like you can have the settings UI for Asus, and your home screen is going to be like Google, or vice versa, or different things like that. So it's really cool. So I really wish that I liked smaller phones. I am not that person. Like I had a regular iPhone 12 and immediately pulled it. Like when I had it, like every time I would see a Pro model iPhone, I'm like, oh, I should have bought the Pro or the Pro Max, I should say. Should have bought that version because I really like the big screen. So this last year when I got the 13, I got the 13 Pro Max because I wanted the bigger screen. And now I really wish Asus would make a Zenfone 10 Pro with a bigger display, like a 6.5 or 6.7 inch display, because man, that would be really tempting to buy. Maybe, put it up $100. You're paying $700 or $800, I guess I should say, at that point.
Yeah.
Still cheaper than a Pixel or an iPhone.
Yep.
And with these specs and the experience that it's got, it would be so tempting.
Well, and that's the thing is that, like, for me, it's the size.
Yeah.
That's the killer. Like, the 9 was really compelling because it was a good phone at a good price and the perfect size.
Yeah.
This one is still the perfect size, but now it's a great phone at what is now a great price because the phone itself is better quality.
Yes.
So it's like, I can honestly say there is only one other phone that isn't actually on the market yet that I would possibly buy over the Zenfone 10 if I were to go buy a smartphone right now. And that's the Razer.
Oh.
The non-Pro Plus whatever fancy pants Razer, because that one's already launched. It's more expensive and the outside screen doesn't make sense to me, but the cheaper version will have a smaller outside screen that does make sense to me. It has the form factor that is easily pocketable that really appeals to me, and it will cost less than $1,000. It'll probably cost actually like maybe $100 more than the Zenfone 10.
Yeah, because the Razer Plus is $1,000, so it's going to be at least it's probably going to be at least $100 less, if not $200.
Exactly. So like that's the only other phone that could appeal to me more than the Zenfone 10, but we don't know for sure. So right now, like if I had to go buy a brand new phone today, it wouldn't be an iPhone. It would be the Zenfone 10. Like that's what it is. 'Cause it's just like, yes, there's a lot of convenience things associated with having an iPhone in the Apple ecosystem, but I have structured my use around not tying myself to Apple's ecosystem too much.
Yeah.
I would lose some conveniences of like between being able to transfer files between my phone and my computer and stuff like that. But Apple's iCloud integration on Android has gotten a lot better over the past few years, And I also still use other cloud services like Box, so I'd be able to get around it without too much difficulty. Like, honestly, all I would be losing out from the Apple ecosystem is Apple Arcade.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. So, yeah, dang. Good job, Asus.
They're killing
You
it, man.
have made just about the perfect phone for me. And Apple, dadgum, guys, freaking
Yeah.
do something good. I don't know.
I mean, between this phone and the ROG phone, Asus has two of the best phones you can buy right now.
Yeah, that's true.
And the other benefit to this phone, yes, it's a smaller phone, which means a smaller battery in size, but the battery life on this thing is phenomenal. Like, people are getting 8 hours of screen on time and can't kill it in a day. Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Having that, like, the smaller screen with the ability to go to a lower refresh rate as needed or as possible, that can really maximize your battery life in a big way. So,
Yeah. There is one more feature that I forgot to mention that I really love on this phone. So the power button on the side is also the fingerprint sensor, but it
right.
can also be customized that if you long press it, it'll open up whatever you want it to. But then it also, if you swipe up or down, if you swipe down on it, brings your notification shade down, and swipe up and it goes it away. Kind of similar. I mean, Google did that on the Pixel phones when they had a fingerprint sensor on the back. And I used that all the time. It was great. So having that right there on the power button on the side is also really handy.
Yeah, except this is one of the few phones you can actually reach the top of the screen with one hand.
True.
So.
And on Android, at least on a Pixel version of Android, you can swipe down from anywhere on the screen and it brings the notification shade down, which is something that took me way too long to get used to on iOS. Doesn't do that.
No, it doesn't. Still. This is why I never use notifications on iOS. I occasionally will use the control panel because it's in the right hand corner and I can reach that with my thumb when I'm holding it with one hand.
Yeah.
But even on the Mini, it's still a bit of a stretch to get over and hit the notifications. And so I rarely ever use the notification stuff.
And that's very typical of an iOS user who's been an iOS user for very long.
A long time, yeah.
Whereas for me, switching over from Android, I hate notifications on iOS because they're getting better.
Yeah.
But man,
for the longest time as an iOS user, you never used notifications because they were stupid. They were broken. They didn't work. And so you just ignored them. Then they finally started making improvements. They finally started to get to be usable in some way, shape, or form. But now they put them out of the way in a corner of the screen that you can't reach. And so you still don't use them because you were never in the habit of using them to begin with. So what's the point of getting into like Apple, you shot yourselves in the foot. Like way back in the iPhone 6 days with notifications, and you just have never recovered.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I still do use notifications the same way I would on Android just because I'm in that habit. I have been for years. So I do still use it. It's just not a great experience, unfortunately.
Yep.
But yeah, this Zenfone, man.
It's a good looking phone.
I really wish they would make a bigger version of it because I would be so I mean, I've always been one that as you know, I'm not one that's just set on I have to buy this phone. I'm on an iPhone, for crying out loud. Whereas for years I was Nexus and then I was Pixel, and like I started with the Samsung. My first smartphone was a Galaxy S2. So, and that's what made me hate Samsung so much, was that phone. I mean, luckily with Android, I could download a custom launcher that made it look like a Pixel, or I guess at that time a Nexus. But, I mean, I've never been one that's like, hey, I'm going to stick with this. And even with Pixel, like, there are other options now. They're not as, I still think Pixel's probably the best for the most part. But, man, Asus is definitely, like, if I were to switch back to Android, even with this smaller display, this is really tempting.
Yeah.
They're just knocking it out of the park.
I mean, let's be honest. You could get the ROG phone if you really want the bigger screen.
True.
You lose out on, like, wireless charging and
Yeah.
cameras, I guess they're not quite as good, but got tons of power.
I mean, the one downside currently with Asus phones is the longevity. So they're promising 2 years of OS updates on this phone.
Yeah.
Whereas both Google and Samsung have now gone up to 4 years of OS updates and 5 years of security patches.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure like other companies are getting better, and I'm sure Asus will get better as time goes on, and they may give you more. They're just saying
They're only
we are
promising
going to
2.
give you these 2 years worth of updates.
Yeah. And as an Apple customer, that's just baffling to me. Like,
Yeah.
it's all like, oh, they're finally dropping support for the original iPhone SE. That's terrible. The phone's like 8 years old. Like, whatever. That was actually last year, I guess, they dropped support for the SE. So I shouldn't complain too much.
Yeah, that is the really unfortunate thing when it comes to any Android phone. Is just the longevity for software stuff is not quite there. Like I said, it is getting a lot better, but it's still nothing like what Apple can do. And there are reasons for that. We don't need to go over that, but
yes.
I mean, this phone is fantastic.
Yep.
But that's all my news for this week. So if you're in the market for a new Android phone, I would say get the Zenfone 10 because it's great.
That's kind of where we're landing right now. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and jump into the news that I've got. We're going to start off with AMD. It was a bit of a surprise about a week and a half ago, launched a new CPU, except it's not a new CPU, right? So AMD is currently on their 7000 series of desktop processors, Ryzen 7000. This is a Ryzen 5 5600. So that's the previous generation. That's their 5000 series processors. And you're like, duh heck. So what this is, it's a 5600 X3D, right? So that uses AMD's 3D V cache that puts a lot of cache on the processor and is what made, for instance, the 5800 X3D into the king of gaming PC or processors for that time period, and what is now making the Ryzen 7700 X3D and 7950 X3D into the reigning champions of gaming performance for this generation, right? So the X3D thing is really good. 3D V cache is great. And having 3D V cache on a 5600X is actually a really good thing. The 5600X was already like a really good bang for your budget CPU for the 5000 series. So having the X3D version of it is, even more bang for your budget, right? It's very confusing about why it's a 5000 series. But basically what has happened is AMD, in the process of making the 5800 X3D, has a bunch of chips that weren't quite good enough to be the 5800 X3D, right? They just couldn't quite get that full 8 core 16 thread performance that the 5800 X3D was supposed to have. But they didn't throw them all out. They were still perfectly good CPUs. They just had a couple of cores that weren't quite up to spec. So AMD has disabled those cores and are now selling it as a 6-core, 12-thread processor, the 5600 X3D. Okay, that's great. It is only going to be available at Micro Center, so that means it is a US exclusive processor. So that's pretty wild. And if you happen to not live next to a Micro Center, SOL, I guess. So that's us here. Freaking.
Can you not, you can't even order it for a Micro Center?
As far as I'm aware, it is in-store exclusive.
Oh my god.
You have to be able to walk into a Micro Center location.
So in their processing of these chips, they got like 20 of them that didn't work the way they wanted to. So they're like, I guess we'll do this.
It was apparently a small enough number that were not good enough to be a 5800 X3D, but also not totally broken. So, because that's the thing, is they still have to work. They still have to be a good processor in order to be a 5600 X3D. So they can't be totally broken. But they're just not quite good enough to be a 5800 X3D, right? So it's like there's a fine line there, and apparently there weren't that many units that fell into that. And Micro Center also is just trying to ink a deal with AMD just to get people into stores for a new location that they're opening, a couple of new locations actually, I think. And so this is kind of their like opening day special thing. They'll have a few thousand of these in stock or something like that. So I imagine scalpers will probably have it available online as well. Don't buy it from them,
No.
listener. Don't ever buy it from them. Especially since, like, the $230 price tag for this thing actually looks pretty darn good versus the 5800 X3D's MSRP of $450. You get 2 cores less, 4 threads less, which for most games ain't going to make that big of a difference, meaning that the 5600 X3D could perform or will perform like similarly to the 5800 X3D in a ton of games, which is great. But the 5800 X3D is currently, since it is generation old, pretty much always on sale for closer to $300 these days. So that makes that $230 price feel a little bit less good.
Yeah.
Especially, you could go with the non-X3D version of like the 5800 or the 5600, or even some of the newer processors like the 7600 and so on and so forth. Okay, so the price isn't that attractive. It's good. The CPU itself is good. And if you can get into a Micro Center to actually buy one, it's worth checking out. Also, I'm jealous. Micro Center, you need to open up a location in Salt Lake City. Okay? Just do it. Okay. Speaking of hardware that launched, the 4060 from Nvidia did in fact launch. I am not going to rant about Nvidia today. I have ranted about Nvidia at length, and in our last podcast, I talked about the rumored upcoming launch of the RTX 4060 and discussed what we were expecting the performance to look like versus the price, and how it was stupid. It was a stupid card for stupid people, and don't buy anything from Nvidia. The reception for this card was pretty much in line with everything that I said in the last podcast, and I feel completely vindicated by, things, and yeah, so I told you so, and that's the end of that piece of news. I've said enough about Nvidia. I don't think they need any more attention.
You know what's really benefited me by doing this podcast with you and Wes is listening to these conversations that I really can't give a whole lot of input to because I don't build my own computers. I don't do gaming stuff. That's not my thing. But what's really fun is when I'm at work and I'm talking with people that do build their own computers, I can say things that make me sound really smart, but then I can also be really sarcastic about other things that does apply to their conversation, which makes it even more fun. So, listener, if you're like me and you don't necessarily, maybe you skip over this part of the podcast, but please don't. But you're going to learn something, whether or not it's beneficial to you in the sense that you're buying the product, or do it like I am, where you can now join in on that conversation and stop somebody from buying an NVIDIA processor or Intel or, no, go get this one. Don't buy that one because they're stupid. It is beneficial.
Yep. I fairly recently joined a new Discord server. Film nerds, basically that's what it is. And they have a channel on there that is specifically for games, like video games and stuff like that, which is not necessarily in the main vein of the server, but it's just a nice little side thing that some people have. And I kind of hopped in there after I got into the server. I'm new, right? I'm trying to be nice, not make waves, be friendly, that kind of thing. But there's a bunch of people sitting in there like, oh yeah, I never buy anything that isn't NVIDIA and Intel. And I'm all like, so you just burn money for fun? That's the thing you do? Okay, cool. That's, at least in the past couple of years, Intel has become competitive again, but freaking like this year, there was some guy who was talking about Starfield, right? Like Starfield is coming out here the end of this year. and they're all like, "Oh yeah, I got to get my computer all ready for Starfield. I got to upgrade to a 4000 series RTX card." And I'm all like, just don't. They're not offering you anything with Starfield that is going to make the gameplay experience better. Absolutely nothing, especially since, as it currently stands, Bethesda has said nothing about actually supporting DLSS, and they have announced that they have a partnership with AMD, which, there's something to be said about the fact that AMD might be scums as well, in the fact that they might be restricting their game partners from actually supporting DLSS in their games in favor of FSR. If all of those acronyms didn't make sense to you, listener, then you probably don't necessarily care about this particular piece of news. But the point is, Starfield is not going to be better with an RTX 40 series card than it will be with an equivalent 30 series card, or, AMD whatever Radeon, like 6000 or 7000 series card. And you probably get more performance for less money with any of those other options than you would with the 40,000 series card. So, I read this conversation and I just wanted to jump in and be like, you close-minded idiots. Just because AMD used to be this way does not mean they are currently doing that. And it's like, one guy did have a point when he said, yeah, but I feel like AMD always gets shafted with their first, like when a game is released, and then it's fixed in a patch later on, like a driver update adds support for that game, and then things are better. And it's like, even if that is the case, are you really so impatient that you can't wait a month to buy the game for AMD to release a driver update? It was a whole conversation. I was just like, nope, I cannot be in this channel right now, or I'm going to get myself banned from the server like an hour after joining it. So I went away and had a conversation about Alien instead. Good movie, listener. It's a good movie. We watched Aliens this past week, in fact, and also a good movie. I'd never seen it before. It's great. Turns out sci-fi classic for a reason. Anywho, that's enough about Nvidia. Okay. Let's talk about Jony Ive.
Ooh, fun.
This is as close as I'm getting to Apple news this week, listener. Apple is doing jack diddly right now. So Jony Ive left Apple, you may be aware, and all of their computers got better. I don't think that that's a coincidence,
I don't
just
think
for the
so either.
record.
Hey, their keyboard got better too.
Yes. Yep. Jony Ive is obsessed with design to an unhealthy degree, which is fine for him. He went off and started a bespoke design firm, and that makes sense, But basically, he just needs to stick to the fashion industry, and that's kind of where he is moving. This past week, I guess it wasn't, it was sort of Jony Ive announced this, but the audio firm Lynn announced that it's a British audio manufacturer, like very hi-fi bespoke audio manufacturer, right? I don't want to make, like, if you've never heard of these people before, listener, it's because either you don't have enough money or you don't care that much about audio. Either of which can be true. But Jony Ive's firm Love From worked with Lynn to design a special edition of their turntable for its 50th anniversary, right? They've been making this model of vinyl turntable for 50 years, and they did a special edition for it that is like very minimalist, but also striking at the same time. Very much Jony Ive's kind of special sauce, and looks sort of Apple-esque in a vague general sort of way. It's going to cost $60,000. So if you have $60,000 to not spend on anything useful, I'll take it. I don't like, why are you buying a $60,000 turntable? I don't know. But it's now designed by Jony Ive, if that matters to you for reasons.
I'm looking at this thing, and it is not a bad-looking turntable.
No, looks nice.
But it's not made out of gold.
No, it's not. It's not even gold plated.
No,
It's not even silver plated. It's chromed. Like, what the heck? I will say, like, I have an Audio-Technica turntable that is also fairly minimalist, cost just about $100. And I will bet you money it plays records almost as well as this thing does. Now, I will grant you that this turntable probably does use a higher quality needle than my Audio-Technica does. And I will also grant you I'm using the built-in phono converter on the turntable. I probably shouldn't be. I should be using it with an external phono device, which I was, but for convenience, I stuffed it into an old 50s radio cabinet, and in order to make it so that I could have multiple devices inside of this radio cabinet, like a CD player and like a Bluetooth connection and a turntable and all of those things, and have them all controlled by the same volume output, it was just way more convenient to use the built-in stuff. So, sue me. I'm not an audiophile. It's totally about the aesthetics. But the point is, even for me, with my setup being all about the aesthetics, there is nothing about this turntable to really draw me to it. So, I don't know. It looks nice. It's a nice looking turntable. They will sell enough of them to justify it, I'm sure, because high-end audio people are
weird.
I don't really know how to they're a special breed. We'll put it that way.
Yep.
And in some ways, like, I kind of understand it. In some ways you have like the Meze Empyreans that are like a piece of art and are made like handmade, bespoke out of like, wood burls harvested from the mountains of Transylvania or something like that. I don't know. It's just, it's freaking like specific and that kind of thing. And I kind of get it just from the perspective of it being almost an artistic statement more than anything else. But they're really nice sounding headphones, They are just notably better than most everything that costs less. The turntables, though, like, I think you're kind of being held back by the medium of a vinyl record more than you are the actual electronics of the turntable itself.
Yeah.
Vinyl is nice. It has its place. It's got its very own acoustic signature, which is special and works really well for some genres of music, like jazz. Like, I'm sorry, jazz on vinyl is just awesome, and nobody can convince me otherwise. But like, if you want to listen to like heavy metal or rock or something like that, don't use vinyl. Like, freaking, that's the worst way you could do it. It removes all of the punch from the highs and the lows. It just like averages everything out into the middle. Anyways, we got here's a tangent. Listener, I've printed you out several tangents for this episode. Okay, I'm going to move on from that. I have one piece of gaming news, listener. The Steam summer sale is happening. It's on. Go buy some games. You could also buy a Steam Deck. That is, in fact, also being discounted for this sale. So, have fun.
Did you buy one yet?
There. I have not. No, I'm still sitting in this like unholy middle ground of, do I upgrade the GPU in my gaming PC or just replace my gaming PC with a Steam Deck? And I'm not. I'm really not sure where I'm going to come down on this one. So,
just do it.
I don't know.
Do it.
I don't know. I mean, at this point, it may come down to a money thing, and I could upgrade my GPU honestly, from my GPU, I could upgrade it for probably $150. And it would be a substantial upgrade. Just go buy a used, 20 series RTX card or like a 5,000, like a 5700 XT or something like that on eBay. And that would be like double the performance of what I currently have. So, price may be a factor, but Steam Deck portability.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. So yeah, that's my gaming news. And I think that does in fact wrap up our news, unless Landon has one more thing.
Nope, I don't.
Okay. I had to ask because otherwise Wes would get mad at me and he wouldn't bring me cheese anymore. So
Ooh, yeah, don't want to risk that. Don't
Right.
risk that.
don't anger Wes. This is
Don't make Cheese Santa mad.
no. Otherwise you get a whole I was going to say like moldy cheese, but there's actually some types of cheese that are good because they're moldy. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, whatever. I'm sure he'd do something bad. Probably like egg my house. Anyways. That's going to wrap it up for us this week, listener. We appreciate you being here to listen. We appreciate your support of the podcast by following, sharing with your friends. If you would like to provide more support to the podcast, and let's be honest, really just Landon and the work that he puts in on the podcast, because me and Wes just kind of show up and Landon does everything else. Let's be honest. Then you can support that on Patreon. We via patreon.com/calling all platforms. You can also check us out on YouTube, Calling All Platforms Tech or Calling All Platforms Gaming. And you can also check us out right back here again next week. So till then, bye.
See ya.
Calling All Platforms is a production of Supporter Sound Studios. To learn more about how you can support the podcast, go to www.patreon.com/callingallplatforms.